Hey everyone, Mel here. Welcome back to the channel. Before I get started today, I just wanted to say a big thank you to all new subscribers and thank you for all current subscribers for your support, for liking and sharing the videos. It means a lot. And if you're wondering, Mel, stop making videos about BPD already and do something else, I am. Myself and Casey this year have started a new channel, Become Who You Are, and this is addressing all levels of healing from the physical, the emotional, and the psychological. It's not to do about your personality disordered ex. It's about helping you recover and move on and thrive and become stronger after trauma. And on top of that, I've also started my own personal vlog channel, which is a combination of sharing tips and advice about what helps me recover from stress, trauma. And also I make kind of arty, relaxing, chilled out, happy, uplifting videos with video clips that I filmed and music that I'm using. So I would love for your support on both of these channels. It's a way for you to keep following us once you've moved on from your ex, because I know what it's like. It's good to binge on videos and then you just forget about the channel, but I would love for you to stay in touch. So do support us on these channels. Comments are open on these channels as well. All right, let's get started. So in my previous video, I did mention the TV show The Act. And I thought I didn't really talk much about it, and this is actually really fitting for this channel and for my viewers. Because if you've dated someone with BPD, chances are their mum or dad likely had BPD as well, as there is a genetic basis to this. So the TV show that I'm going to talk about is called The Act, and you can watch it on Amazon Prime, and it's based on a true life story. Obviously it's been hammed up a bit, like they dramatize certain parts, but you know, that's Hollywood for you. They do this in the film industry. So what I'm talking about in this video is based on the TV show and not exactly what happened in real life, because I think it's good to watch this and you get an idea of what enmeshed relationships really look like and how this can seriously mess up the child and give you a bit more perspective into what it's like for someone with BPD who grew up with a mum who wouldn't let them go. If you haven't seen The Act and you don't want any spoilers, then stop this video and go watch it. If you really don't care and you just want to watch this video anyway, well, I mean, it's based on a true story, so you just have to type it on Google and you find out what happened anyway. So I must admit, when I was watching this TV series, I was thinking to myself, this looks a little bit like BPD. But I'm like, Mel, don't diagnose, you know, keep an open mind. And one of the characters on the show, the actress Juliette Lewis, she herself pointed out borderline personality disorder. And in fact, she said to her son to warn the son about how the mum possibly might have BPD and watch out for the daughter having it as well. And now I thought, is this not something perfect to bring onto this channel? All right, so if you don't care about having spoilers or if you've already seen it, here we go. So this TV show is based on Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And we see this mum and child move into this new place. The child is meant to be about 13 years old and the mother is a very doting mother. The child, Gypsy Rose, she's in a wheelchair and she seems to have a whole list of problems, a lot of health issues, and she's very much dependent on her mum. And in the first episode, when she's being interviewed by this reporter, they have this new house that was built just for them. They were survivors of Hurricane Katrina and lost everything. So they appealed, I don't know whom to, but they got this house built for them. And this journalist is talking to Gypsy Rose and the mum keeps interfering and interrupting and trying to talk on behalf of Gypsy. Warning sign. And then Gypsy's like, oh, she's my best friend. So, okay. So they've got a close relationship, these two. And as the TV show progresses, it becomes very clear that the mother is very, very controlling. She does everything for Gypsy. She washes and bathes Gypsy Rose, makes her food for her, and she has a feeding pipe put into her stomach so she doesn't really eat anything. The mum's telling her, oh, you're allergic to sugar, you can't eat this, you can't drink that. The mum is very controlling about what she watches. And the only thing they watch together is Disney. And you can see that the mother, Dee Dee, really does not like other people interfering with their life. And when new friends come into the scene, when the neighbour tries to befriend Gypsy Rose, Dee Dee has a problem with this. And you can see that Dee Dee does not like Gypsy having any sort of relationship with the father. And any time the father is brought up, Dee Dee will talk crap about him, saying that he left, it's all his fault, she had to make a choice to protect her and the family. It becomes clear that Gypsy has no life of her own outside of her mother. She doesn't go to school, she was homeschooled, she's heavily dependent on the mother, and she believes everything she says. However, things start to unravel, and it becomes clear that Gypsy can actually walk. She can walk, she's not confined to the wheelchair. But the mother has told her that because she has MS, that if she gets up and walks, that it will make her condition worse. The mother also likes to guilt trip her and install a sense of fear and panic by saying, if you are to get up, then people will judge you. What will people think? And throughout this TV series, you see time and time and time again that Dee Dee is forever using emotional blackmail, is very controlling and manipulative over poor Gypsy Rose, telling her that what will happen if she actually thought for herself and did things that Dee Dee didn't approve of. This is a very enmeshed relationship. One of the first things that I learned when I was studying psychology is that an enmeshed relationship is quite common with a borderline mother, and it has serious repercussions on the child. So not only does the child have the genetics of the borderline parent, but the child doesn't really grow up being able to assert his or her boundaries. She doesn't really grow up having a sense of self. And the problem as well is that when the child wants to assert his or her own dominance, wants to be assertive, when the child wants to individuate, this is met with extreme backlash from the controlling and domineering parent. And this becomes so clear in the act. Poor Gypsy Rose, she is trying to find herself, discover who she is outside of what her mum wants her to be. The mum is forever wanting her to dress up as, I think it's Cinderella. And then she's like, no, I want to go to this convention and actually explore my sexuality and dress up, which is met with a very stern no. The poor child isn't allowed to grow up. And even worse, it becomes clearer that the child, Gypsy Rose, isn't actually a child. The mother had been lying to her all this time about her age. Turns out she's actually 19 years old. Now, how would you feel if you found out that your mum has been trying to keep you like a child, not letting you grow up, not letting you have your own friends? She's not allowed her own computer, she's not allowed her own phone, and she has to save all of this for the evening time when mum goes to bed. She discovers that actually she's not allergic to sugar. So she ends up ruining her teeth because nighttime is the only time when she can have fun. So she manages to find money to buy her own computer. She's drinking Coke, and she can't do this in front of the mum because when the mum witnesses this, it installs a sense of fear. Now, with a very controlling, narcissistic, abusive parent, the child grows up with FOG. FOG controls the child's life. By FOG, I mean fear, obligation, and guilt. Now, this is so important to remember when it comes to enmeshed relationships, because in the final episode, when Gypsy is questioned, why did you not just get out of your wheelchair and just leave? There's a reason why. If you have been psychologically abused like this for years, it's hard to just get up and just walk away from it. It's the sense of fear of what will happen if you do that keeps you bound to the person. And so the child turns out to be an adult, ends up being conflicted. On the one hand, she wants to leave the mum. She is sick of being controlled and dominated by her mum. She wants to have a boyfriend. She wants to live her life. She wants to discover who she is. And yet when she finally starts to do that, the guilt, sense of obligation, that brings her back. When you've been psychologically abused and tormented, and you've had emotional blackmail used upon you any time that you try to say no, then this stays within you, and it's very, very hard to just suddenly just let it all go and be the person that you want to be. This kind of independence comes from good parenting, not enmeshed parenting. Part of good parenting is letting your child individuate. This is all natural and should happen. But you can see with Dee Dee Blanchard, she would not let this happen. And in fact, she manipulated the child into believing that the father didn't want to be there. And it's so sad in the last episode when the father meets her and tells her, all this time I wanted to be your dad and I wanted to be in contact. It was your mother who was keeping us apart. And yet poor Gypsy was conditioned, brainwashed into thinking that the dad didn't want her. So she had all this hate and anger towards him. And it was the mother who was manipulating her. And this is a form of emotional incest, when the parent drives a wedge between the child and any other family member so that the child is all to herself. So now Dee Dee doesn't have anyone else to interfere with her parenting. Gypsy Rose is all hers to control, to manipulate, to dominate. And as such, she's relying on Gypsy Rose to give her the emotional support that a partner would give her. And sadly, this is a case for so many people, so many youngsters who end up having to be the surrogate parent, the surrogate partner to a dysfunctional parent. And this is sadly what happened with Gypsy. And the messed up part of it all is that this was medical abuse. There was actually nothing wrong with Gypsy Rose. She didn't need a feeding tube inserted into her stomach. She didn't need to be in that wheelchair. And all of this was inflicted upon her. So many medications, the feeding tube, not being allowed to walk, so that the child will be dependent on the mum and will be forever her supply source, her emotional support, her surrogate partner. With all this in mind, if you had experienced all this abuse, it's hard for you to just suddenly drop it. Sadly, as we see in the TV show, there is so much anger and hatred boiling up inside Gypsy Rose from not being allowed to live her life. She felt trapped, very, very trapped, and she was very much steeped in fantasy. This is what I was talking about in my previous video about. It's a massive warning sign if an adult person is very, very much into fantasy. In particular, Disney. I've noticed. You would not believe how many clients share this with me, that their borderline partner was obsessed with Disney. It's an escapism, it's a fantasy, princess programming, really. And there is a scene where Gypsy meets this man at a convention, and she's so excited at the thought of being with a guy and just having a male friend with her life that she's being way too much. She's being so intense, saying we're going to get married, we're going to have kids. All of this thrown onto this guy who is like not even her boyfriend. And I get it. I really do. I mean, Gypsy being trapped in this enmeshed abusive relationship, she's so desperate to feel good, to escape this, that escaping into fantasy is a way for her to stay sane. And it means that future partners will be experiencing this. They will be experiencing the intensity of someone who wants to have the perfect life because they never did. Someone who is so desperate for freedom, to feel good, for happiness, for love, because they didn't get the healthy love that they needed. And ultimately in enmeshed relationships like this is that the child doesn't know who they are. They grow up into adults not really having a stable sense of self. And this in itself is part of BPD, an inability to regulate one's emotions, not really having a core, stable, continuous sense of self. And often people who don't really know who they are, who don't really have a strong sense of self, may often indulge in fantasy and get lost in it. So in the TV show, things come to a head when Gypsy meets this guy online, and they have an online relationship for a few years, and she asks him, will you kill my mum for me? And the way she does it is engaging in fantasy and appealing to his ego. And again, there's no judgment here, okay? Until you're in that position, it's easy to say that's crazy behavior, but put yourself in her shoes. I guess she's so desperate to want to get out of this. She asks her boyfriend to kill her for him. And because she is so lost in fantasy and not in reality, I don't think she really thought this through. She just seems to think that she can get away with it. There was no planning around it, really. They just went to his parents' house and put in the post the murder weapon, and it was actually her own sense of obligation and guilt and fear about just her being left there that ended up her posting something on Facebook to draw attention so that people can go check out the mum, and she just felt bad about the dead body being left there. And ultimately, this is what got her caught, because she left the location on Facebook, so the police were very easily able to track the location of where she was hiding. And then you see in the final scene when she's in prison and the neighbours, or one of the neighbours, comes to visit her and is really hurt and confused and saying, why did you not just get out of the chair? If you were so desperate to leave your abusive parent, why did you not just get up and leave? Now this is it. This is the crux of enmeshed relationships. It's this paradox of, on the one hand, wanting to leave, but on the other hand, being paralyzed by fear and a sense of obligation and guilt for leaving the parent behind, that you don't end up leaving. Do not underestimate the power of fog. It's very intense. The sense of fear that's installed when you finally do assert your healthy boundaries, when you do finally get up and say, no, enough is enough. When you've had all your life of you being shamed, blamed, punished. Quite often, Gypsy Rose was punished for speaking out, for standing up for herself. She was tied to a bed and not allowed food or any sort of attention. I mean, this is torture. The poor girl was tortured. So you can't just expect someone who's been tortured for like their whole life growing up to just suddenly get up and leave and forget about the parent. We carry our parents in our head, and when we have lived an enmeshed relationship with our mum or our dad, it's hard for us to remove them from our minds, even when we do move out. There is always this sense of feeling guilty for leaving them behind, a sense of obligation of needing to look after them. And this comes from enmeshed relationships. So I'm making this video here because quite a few of my clients have borderline partners who had an enmeshed relationship with their mum or with their dad. And it's really hard to wrap your head around why they are still wanting to keep a relationship with a dysfunctional parent. Do not underestimate the dynamics of your childhood, of having a parent controlling you, manipulating you, dominating you, making you feel scared. We are so dependent on our parents when we are younger. We see them as gods when we're younger. And although when we become teenagers and as an adult, we want to individuate, the pull to stay in relationship with this parent is all too real. It's very strong. And then the person has to manage the conflict of both being very angry towards this parent and then feeling guilty about being angry, feeling responsible for the parent. For those who have been in an enmeshed relationship, it is a long, hard process, but change is possible. For some people who are very, very severely affected by this, you may need more support. And I'm going to talk more about this in my follow-up video. I just wanted to keep this video for now about The Act. So I highly recommend watching The Act, because not only is it just fantastic acting, but it will give you insight into what it was like for your borderline partner growing up. If he or she had an enmeshed relationship by their parent, especially the mum, the primary caregiver, it will give you an understanding of why it's hard for them to just get up and leave, why it's hard for them to rid themselves of the sense of responsibility and obligation. And this isn't to tell you, people who have dated people with BPD, that you shouldn't be angry at them. It's not the case. I come with a both and approach rather than an either or. I don't think it's going to be helpful here saying you need to do this or you need to do that. It is normal to both feel compassion for your borderline partner or your borderline ex, as well as feel angry and hurt about what happened, to hold both and to get an understanding about what it was like for him and her can help you connect the dots a bit better, can help you understand where they came from. So one final thought on The Act is, it's not mentioned in the TV show, but if you look online about the real life story, so the mum, Dee Dee Blanchard, she was murdered by Gypsy Rose's boyfriend, and posthumously the doctor suggested that she had Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Nowadays it's called fictitious disorder imposed by another. And one final thought on Munchausen syndrome by proxy is that it's about garnering sympathy from others, getting attention from others, because poor you've dedicated your whole life to looking after this child who is sick. And we see this in the TV show. Dee Dee just wants attention from others. She wants the sympathy. And yet when the man comes onto the scene and wants to help her out, it's like, no, I can't stop being the victim here. Is this not a little bit like quiet borderline personality disorder? You know, I often talk about quiet borderline types. Does this not tick the box a little bit? I don't know. Look, I'm not diagnosing her. I'm just asking questions for you to be curious and to consider. And the whole point of these videos is to help you consider and question things, as well as maybe connect the dots a little bit. All right, so I'll leave it here. And if you've got any feedback, let me know. My email address is in the video description. Would love to hear from you. All right, until next time. Bye for now.